There we go. Welcome back. We had a little audio video difficulty. Sometimes this iPad just cuts off in the middle of a sentence, but we were recapping chapter 16, and remember that Serafina was going to meet Braden out somewhere very secretively so they could discuss about some things that Serafina has discovered, possibly trying to figure out who this man in the black cloak really is. Chapter 17, page 206. I know you're anxious to hear chapter 17. Serafina met Braden outside in the darkness at the base of the great house's rear foundation, where they hoped no one would see them. The forested valley of the French Broad River lay below them, and the black silhouette of the mountains layered into the distance. A mist was rising up from the canopy of the valley trees, as if the entire forest was breathing. "Did you see how well Mr. Thorne played the piano?" Serafina asked in disbelief. "Did you know he could do that?" "No, but he can do a lot of things," Braden said, pulling the bits of chicken out of his pocket and handed them over to her. "You're right, he can," she said as she gobbled the chicken down. "We keep saying that, but how is that possible?" "Just the way he is. That's just the way he is," Braden said as Serafina slurped up the clotted cream. "But what do you know about Mr. Thorne?" she asked as she wiped her mouth. "I mean, what do you really know about him?" "My uncle says that he should be an inspiration to us all." "Yes, but how do you know you can trust him?" "I told you, he saved Gideon, and he's been very helpful to my aunt and uncle. I don't understand why you dislike him so much." "We've got to follow the clues," she said. "He's a good man," Braden said, becoming increasingly upset. "You just can't go around accusing everyone. He's been nothing but nice to me." She nodded in understanding. Braden was a loyal person. But stop for a second. "Who is he, Braden?" "He's a friend of Mr. Bendel and my uncle." "Yes, but where does he come from?" "Mr. Bendel told me that way back before the war between the states, Mr. Thorne owned a large estate in South Carolina. It was burned and destroyed by the Union troops. He'd been born and raised a rich man, a landowner, but he'd lost every penny he had and had to flee for his life." "He doesn't seem poor now," she said, confused by the story. "Mr. Bendel said that after the war, Mr. Thorne was so poor he could barely survive. He had no house, no property, no money, and no food. He became a homeless drunk, wandering through the streets, swearing obscenities at any northerner who happened to walk by." Serafina frowned. "This is Montgomery Thorne you're talking about, the man who can do everything? Your description doesn't match with the Mr. Thorne I've seen." I know, Braden said in exasperation. "That's just what I'm saying. He's had a hard life, a bad life, but he turned himself around. He's been nothing but kind to me. You have no cause to think ill of him. Just finish the story you were telling me. What else? What happened to him? How did he get here?" "Mr. Bendel told me that one night, after drinking too much in a pub in one of the local villages, Mr. Thorne was walking home, stumbled off the road, and got lost in the woods. He fell into an old well that no one used anymore and was badly hurt. I guess he was stuck down there for 2 days. He can't even remember who found him and helped him out of the well. But when he finally recovered from his injuries, he realized that he'd hit rock bottom in his life and would soon die if he didn't change his ways. So he decided to make a better man of himself." "What does that mean?" she asked, thinking the whole story sounded like 2 buckets of hogwash, and that Mr. Bendel had been pulling Braden's leg. "Mr. Thorne got a job working in a factory in the city. He learned about the machines and got promoted to manager. I don't know factory machines, but after that he became an attorney." "What's that?" she asked. She couldn't believe all that stuff she didn't know. "A lawyer? Sort of an expert on laws and crimes? How did he become an attorney when he was working in a factory?" The whole story was getting crookeder and crookeder. "That's the thing," Braden continued. "He worked and applied himself, and he made himself a better man. He traveled for a while, then he moved back here, bought a grand house in Asheville, and started buying land in the area." "Come on," Serafina said incredulously. "You say that. You're saying he went from a drunken, poverty-stricken wretch to a gentleman landowner? I know the whole thing sounds impossible, but you've seen him. Mr. Thorne is a very smart man. He's very rich. Everyone loves him." She shook her head in frustration. There was no denying any of that, but still, Something wasn't right. She looked out across the valley in the mist, just thinking. Nothing about Thorn's story made much sense to her. It was like one of those tales that's filled with half-truths and deceptions, little twists in the telling. And she'd learned from hunting rats that where things were a jumble, that's where the rat had been. So where did your uncle meet him? She asked. I think they were both being fitted for shoes at the custom shop downtown, which explains why Mr. Vanderbilt's shoes sounded like his. What? Nothing. Why does Mr. Thorne always wear gloves? She asked, seeing if she could pick up the scent on a different trail. I never noticed that he did. Is there something wrong with his hands? He plays the pianos with his gloves on. Doesn't that seem very strange? And he was wearing leather gloves the morning the men found you in the carriage on the forest road, even though it wasn't cold. And you said he was an expert at machines. Do you think he could break a dynamo so that not even the smartest mechanic in the world could fix it? What kind of question is that? Braden asked in confusion. Why do you, and how did a southern plantation owner learn Russian? I don't know, Braden muttered, becoming increasingly defensive. And what did he say to Mr. Rostinov? Braden shook his head, refusing to believe any of it. I don't know. Nobody's perfect. He said he was extremely smart. You said he was extremely smart. Could he even beat your uncle at chess? Well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe he just made an honest mistake with Mr. Rostinov. Why did poor Mr. Rostinov get so upset? He was as nettled as a badger in a porcupine fight. But he wasn't just upset. He seemed scared. Scared of what? Of Thorne? Why? Serafina shook her head. She didn't know. Her thoughts were all discombobulated. But it felt like the clues to the mystery were swirling all around her. All she had to do was put them together. Where exactly was that rat hiding? That was the question. You told me that when your aunt met Clara Brahms, she wanted you to be friends with her, Serafina said, trying yet another path. Yes. How did your aunt and uncle first meet the Brahms family? Braden shrugged. I don't know. My uncle knew them somehow. Your uncle? Serafina said, sensing another connection there. Why do you say it like that? Braden asked defensively. My uncle doesn't have anything to do with any of this, Serafina, so just take it back. Who told him about Clara being good at piano? How did he hear about her? I don't know, but my uncle isn't responsible for any of this. I can tell you that much. Try to remember, Braden, she said. Who first told him about Clara Brahms? Mr. Bendel and Mr. Thorne, they're always going to the symphony concerts and things like that. And Clara was an exceptionally talented piano player, she said, remembering the maid's words to the footman. She kept trying to think it through. She was getting the same tingling feeling she felt when she was closing in on one of her four-legged enemies. Yes, I heard her play the first night she came to the house, Braden said, nodding. She was extremely good. And you've heard Thorne play? Yes, you've heard him. He's an excellent player. And then Braden paused. He frowned and looked at her in surprise. You don't think... She just stared at him, seeing if he would come to the same conclusion she had. Many people know how to play the piano, Serafina, he said firmly. Not me, she countered. Well, no, me neither. Not like that. But I mean, a lot of people do know how to play the piano really well. And speak Russian and play the violin too. Well, sure. There's Tchaikovsky. And I don't know who that is, Mr. Know-It-All, but he is also a chess expert. Well, probably not, but... And he can turn a team of horses and a full-size carriage around on a narrow mountain road? You've gone crazy, Braden exclaimed, looking at her in bewilderment. What are you talking about now? I'm not sure exactly, she admitted, but think about it. I am thinking about it. And what do you see? It's just a big mishmash as far as I can tell. Nothing means anything. No. Everything means something. Think about the Black Cloak. You've seen it. It seems to allow the wearer to wrap people up and murder them, or at least capture them in some way. It's horrible, he shuddered. Maybe it doesn't just murder them. I don't understand. Maybe it absorbs them. That's disgusting. What do you mean? Maybe that's why Thorn accidentally addressed Mr. Rostonov as father and papa, because Thorn had absorbed his knowledge of the Russian language from Anastasia. Are you saying that he consumed Anastasia's soul? She grabbed Braden's arm so fast that it startled him, and he jumped. Think about it, she said. The owner of the cloak absorbs his victims, their knowledge, their talents, their skills. Think about what that would mean, what that would be like. If he absorbed enough people, he'd gain many skills and talents. He'd become the most accomplished man in society. He'd be smart, he'd be rich, and everyone would love him, just like you said. I refuse to believe Mr. Thorne would do that, Braden said. It's just not possible. His whole body seemed to be tightening against her. It makes sense, Braden. The whole thing. He's stealing souls, and he's coming for you next. No, Serafina, Braden said, shaking his head. It can't be. That's crazy. He's a good man. At that moment, she heard a door from the main house creak open and the sound of someone approaching. That's the end of chapter 17 of Serafina and the Black Cloak by Robert Beatty. I hope you have enjoyed chapter 17 and are looking forward to reading chapter 18. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.